Do you ever find yourself wandering alone in the forest? What if I told you that your next hike could be your last? Tonight, I'm going to share two chilling, true forest horror stories that will make you think twice before stepping into the woods again. Don't wait until it's too late. Watch this video before your next walk through the trees. I've slept in rain that came down like rope and in wind that made trees argue with themselves. I've learned the after midnight grammar of owls and the small dishonesties of fog. So I don't mistake the woods for a friend, they're a place that sometimes lets you pass. Still, when Sarah said we should take June camping, no public sites, no neighbors, just a stretch of quiet with creek light and enough sky to breathe, I packed without hesitation. We took both shepherds. Leah is older, a composed shadow who paces her love like a metronome. Guts is younger, a blunt-headed loyalist who believes everything can be solved with attention and gravity. June lobbied with the solemnity of 9 to sleep in her own one-person tent. If Guts stays with me, she bargained. I said yes, and then spent the rest of the day pretending that yes didn't mean I would listen all night. We left before dawn, town still holding its breath. Asphalt turned to scarred dirt, then to the idea of a road. Alder branches wrote their cursive along the paint. I drove by a friend's old directions, a culvert like a mouth, a downed fir with a notch chainsawed through it, and then a sudden widening into meadow. The clearing was perfect in the way you only get by accident. Hemlock and Douglas fir cradled a shallow bowl of grass, a creek stitched the far edge, making a noise that sounded like competence. I cut the engine and listened to metal cool. For a moment I could hear everything: insect thread work, water over stone, the faint shock of our own arrival. We did the perimeter walk you do when you intend to sleep where you don't belong. I scanned for widowmakers, Sarah for flatness, June for flowers. We pitched the family tent on the meadow's soft shoulder and June's little tent nearby, where Leah lay down like a drawn line. We hauled food into the trees and made the small, human adjustments that trick you into believing a spot is yours: mugs on the table, a coat slung over a camp chair, the stove set level as a promise. Peace slid over the afternoon. Still, beneath it, something hummed, a tautness you feel when a room quiets too quickly. Not danger. Just a sense that the place remembered something you didn't. By dark, we had fire and the arithmetic of stars. June kissed us both goodnight as if we were traveling sailors and zipped herself into independence. Guts flopped across her doorway like a bridge drawn up. Leah curled at the threshold of our tent with a sigh that said she would count our breaths. It's so quiet, Sarah murmured. First night quiet, I said. By tomorrow the forest will remember to ignore us. I almost told her about the article from months back: the father murdered in a tent at a public campground, the family asleep, the thin fabric giving way like the idea of a door. It had snagged my mind the way a nail snags a shirt. I chose not to say it aloud, as if silence could keep it from existing. Sometime past midnight, I woke to footsteps. They were slow and heavy. Not in a hurry, not drunk, not lost. They followed a deliberate path around our tent, wide enough to miss the guy lines, close enough to be a choice. The heel-to-toe weight had the cadence of a person who knows how their feet work on uneven ground. I touched Sarah's forearm, felt her come awake the way a deer does: no movement, all attention. Leah lifted her head, her ears two questions. Guts did not bark. That absence felt worse than any sound. The steps paused beside June's tent. There was a soft brush against nylon fingers, maybe. And then a breath. Human. Close enough to make the fabric accept a tiny inward curve. My hand found the fixed blade near the zipper. I hate guns in tents. I could imagine too many ways a child meets a trigger in the dark. The knife's weight was a poor substitute for a wall. "Hey," I said, low and edged. The steps held. The knight balanced on its heels. Then the walker moved away with the patience of someone who has no reason to run. A long arc through grass, a stitch back into trees. The air filled in behind it as if it hadn't been parted at all. I did a slow patrol between tents, no flashlight, no theater. I listened to June's breath, felt the tense heat against my palm, and stood in the cold until the fire's ghost died and the sky lightened like a promise kept for once. We cooked breakfast with the care people reserve for church and hospital lobbies. June held court on dragonflies while Leah drifted the perimeter. Sarah didn't ask, and I didn't volunteer. We took the deer path toward the creek to prove to ourselves that this was a morning like any other. 2 bends in, a spur turned right into shade. Feet had chosen it enough times to flatten intention into trail. We followed and arrived at what had been a campsite. A tent lay collapsed and skinned. Pole snapped. Fly shredded. A sleeping bag gutted down the middle, its fill like small weather. A white gas canister caved in by a careful heel. Pans flung into a wide ring as if declaring a boundary. An enamel mug clung to a root like a survivor on a lifeboat, its cartoon moose smiling through a cracked handle. Bears make a mess with appetite and accident. This was something else. Someone had knocked the camp out of being a camp. Someone had cut guy lines cleanly 3 in a row. Someone had beaten a canister the way you beat a thing for not obeying the rules. "Stay with me," I told June, and the command sounded like a promise I couldn't afford to break. Sarah crouched at the split bag. "This wasn't animals," she said, as if arguing with the air. Guts froze, hackles rising like a breaking wave. He stared toward a shallow trench near the fire ring. "Not a grave, the ground has a different sag for that. A drag mark. Beside it, at a forgiving angle, the faint impression of a heel, tread smudged by weather and time." I swore under my breath. Leah leaned into June like ballast. We walked back along the creek. No jokes, no theories, just the soft practice of pretending we were fine. At camp, our tents looked flimsy in a new way. The meadow had the expression of a room whose owner has returned and is deciding whether we belong. "We can go," I said to Sarah while June built a tower of smooth stones. "It's not cowardice. It's math. We stay one more night," she said, choosing, and owning what choosing meant. "But we make it hard to be surprised." We made tripwires out of paracord and noise tin cups, bent spoons, a length of old tent pole, a ring of quarters we justified as an offering to future anxiety. Knee-high across the tree line, over the deer path, along the road remnant, angled by the creek approach. June tied clove hitches with a concentration that made her tongue appear at the corner of her mouth. Sarah's face was a study in competence stolen from dread. Under a low hemlock bough, my fingers found another cord, blackened, stiff, and older than anything we'd brought. At its end lay a rusted ring, thumb-thick and buried in decades of duff. I brushed needles away until metal blinked up like a small, tired eye. "Like ours," Sarah said, crouching beside me. "Someone's," I said. We followed the dead cord until the earth refused to confess more of it. I tugged lightly, the forest tugged back. I left it. A warning belongs to the place it was made, and this one didn't want to be relocated. Dusk came in pewter. We ate the kind of dinner that exists to keep hands moving, no one hungry, everyone chewing. June zipped herself into independence, guts folded across her door, and Leah took station where the firelight ended. I loaded a magazine and chambered around, not because I believed in gunpowder more than in common sense, but because sometimes fear needs theater to keep from improvising a worse play. I stepped 5 yards into the meadow and fired into the dirt, shot after shot, each crack a sentence for the dark to diagram. When the casing's last ping settled, the night felt newly informed. Sarah gave me a look that meant 2 things at once: don't, and thank you. We lay in our tent and waited for noise. Our bells stayed asleep. Even the creek whispered as if the air had been told to keep things down. I've known mountain silences that feel like prayer. This felt like a rule. My breath sounded like a trespass. Sarah's hand on my arm said stay more than it said safe. The mind performs badly in such rooms. It produces the article again, the tent, the father, the small, obedient walls. It replays footsteps until they're either proof or invention. It splices the ruined camp to a person with a hammer, then to a shape with a human walk. Sleep did not visit, it posted a notice and left. Around the hour that hunting clocks used to be set by the hour with no number, just a certainty, I realized the quiet wasn't empty. It was held. As if the meadow had been made into a bowl and sound kept rolling back into its hands. Dawn arrived carefully. A bird tested a single note. Then another remembered the sky and sang like it meant to live. Light unstitched the seams between trees. I breathed in relief that tasted like apology. Pack, I said, already out of the bag. We folded our small civilization. Unstrung our caution. I pressed my palm to June's little tent, as if gratitude could be transcribed through nylon. The old ring stayed in its pocket of earth, a period at the end of someone else's warning. We drove out with branches writing their casual insults along the truck. On pavement, June fogged the window with her breath and drew a crooked heart. Gut slept sitting up, eyes half open like an old soldier who knows better than to trust a chair. Sarah watched the road and blinked more than necessary. We didn't say footsteps. We didn't say ruin. We said burgers and laundry and next time in voices that moved around the reel. At home, life sprinted back into its place, grateful to be needed. 3 months later, after the camping gear had migrated to shelves and the metal cup of meadow flowers became June's pencil holder, Netflix suggested a documentary. Missing 411. I clicked because curiosity is an obedient dog with no sense of what it's dragging home. The film spoke in sober sentences. Clusters. Trails that end in questions. Counties that wear disappearances like unexplained weather. It didn't sell monsters, and I respected it for that. But it didn't tidy anything either. When our state appeared, when the narrator's hand described a circle that might have brushed the ribs of our clearing, something clicked behind my sternum. I paused and rewound. A county name. A cluster that implied a kind of gravity. We camped there, I said. Near there, Sarah said, offering the mind a buffer. Near, I allowed. I looked at her, and then at the screen, and then at Guts asleep on the rug with his paws twitching towards some dream he was saving us from. The documentary kept talking. Silence said more. Maybe the map's radius meant trailheads and high-traffic pullouts, not the odd little pockets where luck and arrogance meet. Maybe the circle was too rough. Maybe I wanted it to be exact because fear prefers a shape it can point to. It didn't matter. There had been footsteps. There had been a ruined camp where someone had turned safety into an argument. There had been an old, rusted ring, the ghost of our own idea, braided by someone who needed it years before we drew breath beside it. There had been a night held shut like a palm over a candle. And there had been a dog who did not bark. I've adjusted my checklists. I still scan for widowmakers and listen for water and seek the kind of ground that forgives a back. But before all that, I listen for the feeling of eyes. If it arrives, I don't argue with it like a man who wants to audition for a rescue story. I leave. When June asks for her own tent now, I say yes and pitch it a few feet closer. I tell her bravery includes changing your mind. I tell her the smartest people I know leave when their blood remembers how. She calls that cheating the adventure, I call it keeping the series going. Sometimes I think about hammering a sign into that meadow, "This place does not want you." Sometimes I consider tucking a note into a crack in the old stump, "Make bells. Believe your dog." Mostly, I remember the ring in the dirt and imagine how many notes the forest has already swallowed. When I pet Guts, I press my face behind his ear where warm fur smells like sun and dust and something ancient dogs carry for us. He leans into the pressure and exhales. I say good boy, and it's the most honest prayer I know. What was it? A man with boots and a grievance. A pair of eyes that wore a human walk like a mask. The forest rearranging its furniture around us to see if we'd sit differently. I don't know. I don't think anyone does, not the documentary, not the men with red strings, not the ranger who knows when to be in a different patch of trees. I know this, we went to the woods and were allowed to leave. Some rooms insist on silence not as a courtesy but as law. We slept inside such a room and obeyed its rule. We did not ring. We did not test. We counted heads and found the count unchanged. If you insist on solitude instead of a campground with angry reviews and generators after midnight, make the meadow introduce itself first. Hang your bells and accept that they might not ring. Watch your dog. He knows the shape of rooms you cannot see. He knows when the right word is no word at all. The campsite we found was supposed to be empty. The forest reminded us what supposed to is worth. We left with our lives and a story we don't tell often, because telling it changes rooms around us in ways that make doors feel thinner. But sometimes, late, when the dishwasher sighs and the street completes its inventory of nothing, I remember the weight of the footsteps and the way the nylon moved inward under someone else's breath. And I feel guts lean heavier against my leg, as if he's pinning me to the side of the world. The bells never rang. That's the part that wakes me, not the footsteps, not the ruined camp, not the map's neat circle. The quiet. The held, curated quiet, as if something was listening too hard to let us make a sound. People want fear to end with meaning. They want to be spared for a reason. I don't have one to offer. We were spared, and that is both the whole story and the part of it that refuses to end. I started running the forest loop with Hannah because we needed something that felt like progress without being a spreadsheet or a meeting. Our jobs bled through us, the run was supposed to rinse it out. The trail wasn't wild, exactly more like the city's green apology, a ring of trees that backed onto the reservoir, dirt packed hard by shoes and bike tires, a lattice of lights on a timer that came on at dusk and stepped down to black at midnight. If you hit the hills at the right time, you could catch a line of orange dots flicking on ahead of you like breadcrumbs laid by an efficient ghost. We went 3 nights a week, then 4, then any evening that didn't collapse under its own weight. Hannah kept a steady pace and a steadier stream of commentary, work drama, podcast trivia, how some people have resting rich face. I liked the way her talking pushed air in and out of my lungs without my having to do much about it. By the 3rd week, the path had imprinted itself, the wooden footbridge that thunked underfoot, the mossy switchback with the smell of cold pennies, the one bench at the top of the north hill that faced a slice of water, no plagues, just a slat of wood with a view. That was where he sat. The first time, I thought he was taking a break. He had a runner's clothes synthetic top, reflective stripes on his shorts, but he wasn't running. He perched on the far end of the bench, knees tight, hands pressed together between them like he was praying to his own grip. Thin, almost diagrammatic. Not old, not young. Cheekbones that made shadows even under the lights. A runner's watch on his left wrist that caught and flung back the timed glow every 30 seconds. Evening, Hannah called, because Hannah is the kind of person who says it even to raccoons when they look surprised. He didn't respond. He looked toward the water. I didn't see his eyes. He was there again the next week. Same bench, same posture. He sat like a folded map, all edges and corners, withheld territory. He never had a bottle, never stretched, never checked his watch unless the light hit it for him. He didn't look at us, but the way he didn't look felt deliberate, like a magician's flourish before a reveal that never came. New mascot. Hannah puffed. Trail sprite. Bench goblin. Maybe he's injured, I said. Or timing someone else. Timing us. She laughed and pushed the pace for the fun of the joke. I went with her. The man didn't move. After a month, he became part of the furniture in the same way the creak on the footbridge did, a detail you catalog without discussing. If he was there, he was there. If he wasn't, the bench looked wrong, like a mouth without teeth. Once, passing, I risked a look straight at him. His eyes met mine and slid off, not like shyness, more like contempt. It landed in my chest like a dropped coin. Hannah noticed the look on my face. Creep. Just, unfriendly. Then we can be unfriendly right back, she said, and told a story about an office kitchen bandit that occupied the rest of the hill. The lights were on timers. There was a laminated sign at the trailhead with a schedule that made the loop feel like a public pool, lights on at dusk, off at midnight. After that, they'd flicker for anyone who hit the button down at the entrance, a rectangle of steel you had to press hard with your palm, like an elevator that didn't trust you to mean it. I liked the predictability. The world inside my phone was a spinning coin. Here the lights obeyed a schedule you could set your breath to. One Thursday, Hannah texted 15 minutes before we were due to meet, "Emergency. Can't. You okay solo?" I typed yeah before the question landed fully. I had a good day at work. My legs wanted to move. The loop felt like mine. The trailhead was mostly empty by 9. A couple returning to their car asked us to take a photo in front of the map. I obliged and made small talk about trail shoes while they told me about their puppies like grandparents. In the fading light, the reservoir looked like a sheet someone had pulled tight over a big bed. The lights on the dam winked in a line like a runway landing strip for birds with better plans. The first mile unspooled the way it always did. Footbridge. Penny switchback. My breath carved into 2-note phrases I recognized. I didn't look at my watch because that always made the minute hand smug. When the path lifted toward the North Hill, I expected my familiar little dread, the bench, the man, that feeling like a sliver under the nail, small, sharp, living there until it makes you sorry you have fingers. The bench came into view, a thin geometry against the trees. It was empty. The emptiness was ridiculous, the way a stage looks ridiculous when the actor you've memorized is missing. The bench looked smaller. The view looked bigger. I felt the way you feel when you realize your house is quiet not because it's peaceful, but because someone deliberately removed the noise. I ran past it and pretended my body didn't notice. It did. My shoulders crept toward my ears. I thought about turning down my music to let the world in, but I wasn't listening to any. I'd started carrying my phone for safety and never pressed play. The path ahead was laced with orange light. The air tasted like rain someone had promised later. The hill steep end. I leaned forward as if to keep my worries from slipping out of my pockets. Somewhere behind me, gravel gave under a weight that wasn't mine. I didn't turn around. Every story that ends in the dark has a piece where someone looks back and shifts the odds in some tiny way that matters. I pretended I was superstition-proof and just kept running. A moment later, the breathing reached me anyway. It wasn't like mine. It wasn't like anyone's I'd run with. It was too loud, not the volume of a person near you, but the volume of someone who hadn't learned how to keep their breath inside their body. Harsh, open-mouthed, gulping sound, as if air were water and he was drowning in it. I glanced over my shoulder. The man from the bench was running. The word running had to be updated. His legs were moving faster than a walk. His arms were doing something adjacent to the human version of swinging. But he moved like a puppet that had learned to mimic cadence without absorbing its meaning. His knees flicked too high and then too low. His left arm made wide, imprecise half circles as if sketching an argument he'd forgotten how to finish. His head stayed level, eyes locked on the hinge of my left shoulder with so much focus it felt like touch. I sped up without deciding to. The timer lights did their 30-second glow-ons like the path was teaching me Morse. My body did the math of flight, Lungs upshifted, quads ignited, ankles negotiated in the quick language they use when the brain is late to the conversation. Hey. I called, because we say hey to strangers as if the word can rearrange their contents into something manageable. Do you need something? The only reply was that breath, raked in and flung out. On a downhill, he gained on me with a speed that did not come from fitness. On the uphill that followed, he fell back, but not by enough. I could feel him recalculating the distance the way rain recalculates gutters. My wedding necklace, the one with the small disc stamped with my daughter's initial, slapped my chest with each stride. I put a hand to it the way you do when you mean to press an elevator door closed faster, as if my palm could fix reality. My mind, meantime, ran through the paltry list of things women are told to carry to make themselves less appetizing to harm. Keys. Alarm app. The weight of a phone with a battery that is never full when you need it. The path forked after the next bend. Left led to the parking lot in a half-mile of open, well-lit track where local dads did sprints and pretended not to compete with each other. Right dug deeper and promised another hill you felt the next morning. I took left as if I were re-entering society. The man's feet slapped behind me, stiff on the transition to pavement. His breathing didn't change. It couldn't get more frantic, it had started that way. If I made it to the lot, I told myself, there would be other people. A security camera aimed at the overflow loop. A button for the lights at the trailhead, metal-faced and stubborn, one hard press, and radar orange would return to the trees. Something moved in the dark to my right, and every nerve I owned turned toward it like sunflowers obeying the sun. A deer bounded away, the thump of its power like a hand on the earth. I let out a laugh that was more a noise of reclamation than joy. The laugh itself felt like bad strategy. Laughter is a scent, and fear smells it. The path narrowed between two boulders. I cut between them and felt my necklace catch on the edge of my sports bra. It snapped. Metal popped in my ear like a small, precise shot. The chain slid off my neck and landed on the pavement with a delicate sound, a private bell. I didn't stop. It was reflex to look down, reflex to note where this had happened, this little grief inside the big one, a marker my heart would recognize if I went missing and someone I loved came here to stand and ask the world to give me back. I flicked the chain with the toe of my shoe so it settled by the trail marker post. A sign. If there would have to be signs. The lot was close enough for my mind to start making lists again, car unlock drive. But the path kinked and dipped, and with the kink the deer grass closed in, the lights fell into a blind spot, and the lot disappeared as if it had never been an option. The man's breath hit the back of my hair. Not literally. It was that close in the way of bad dreams that wrap the air tight around you and call it realism. The decision arrived like an animal takes a bush, sideways, sudden. I stepped off the path into the trees. The dirt gave under my shoes. Fern slapped my shins. The ground tilted itself into a warning. Branches, thin and jealous, wrote on my arms. I cut left then right between the first two trunks and did that trick you learn when you move through clutter in the dark. You turn your shoulders into a thought you'd like to fit through a narrow space. He followed. I heard the slap of his shoes leave the path, the awkward tear of someone not used to roots thinking out loud under their weight. A sound of fabric caught and then ripped. A curse in a language I didn't recognize. Or not a curse. Words said with the quiet anger of someone practicing polite violence. I lay down. I didn't think lie down and drop elegantly into a prepared posture. I fell in stages, a collapse disguised as intention. Chest to moss, face to soil that smelled damp even after a week without rain, hands under my ribs in that small, imploring shape prayer takes when the body asks the earth to let it be part of it. I made myself less than person height. I made my lungs translate themselves into slower animals. He stepped into the space I'd vacated. He stopped where I might have been if I'd kept going. His breathing sawed the air. He said something I could not file under any language my head believed in. Not quite word syllables that tasted like counting and like pleading at once, the mouth's attempt to occupy the world while the eyes looked for prey. The sentence repeated, soft, urgent, intimate with itself. The repetition made it worse. I pressed my cheek against earth and found a seam of cold that felt like a hand. The lights on the path went out. The annihilation was total. Even the lake, always willing to tell the sky's version of events, closed its eyes. The dark had a presence like a person. It introduced itself with confidence. Every childhood story about being sensible and getting help sprinted past me and kept going without me. Then a single light popped on somewhere behind us and stretched a thin pane of orange between trunks. He had hit the button, I thought foolishly, the one at the trailhead. Or someone else had. The lights returned in sequence, a crate of oranges being opened one slat at a time. His breath changed in that small way breath does when a room's geometry makes it a participant again. He moved. Not toward me. Not back to the bench that had made him into furniture. He moved along the offshoot I had not taken, calling softly to the air, the way you call a dog you have convinced yourself is still yours. The part of me that was only terror announced itself, the part that loved my child and Hannah and the gentle slope of my husband's shoulders after a long day stepped over it. I didn't go back for the lot. I didn't go back for the necklace or for proof. My car could be replaced by insurance and tears. My phone, too. I turned away from the path entirely and made the trees my road. The city had not offered me a route, I would cut my own. Branches hit my face and did their work. Roots made a mockery of my ankles and then relented. The forest floor rolled and dipped like muscle. I aimed for the sound of traffic I did not yet hear. In the black spaces between the light's return, I thought about the picture of my daughter on my lock screen, the one with her hair too long and her two front teeth missing and her hands stained purple from berries we weren't supposed to pick. It glowed in my head like an emergency exit sign, red and ridiculous. It took less time than I deserved to reach the ring road. The path's tastes and rules gave way to the wide shoulder, to gravel, and cigarette ends and the smell of hot oil. I stepped into the bright and waved my arms like the choreography of an airplane marshal, hoping the first car was driven by someone whose fear had never been taught to wear my face. It was. A woman with a toddler asleep in a car seat checked her locks before she cracked the window, and I loved her for both things. Please, I said, and my voice made me sound like hiccups. Can you call my husband? I can't, my phone is in the car, please. She unlocked the passenger door without making it look like pity. Get in, she said. Seat belt. What's his number? I gave it twice. She stayed on the line with him long enough to make sure he understood. The toddler snored an ethic I admired. My body shook in large, showy movements I could not stop. The woman turned up the heat and said nothing I had to answer. My husband met us at the grocery store lot, the kind that smells like hot bread even at 10 at night. He didn't ask questions in the car, he let me put my forehead on his shoulder and breathe like I was learning from scratch. When I could speak, I told him everything I'd let fit into words. We argued only about what to do next. I wanted to take the new safety I'd been loaned and spend it right away on more safety. He wanted to go back for the car. It's a 5-minute task, he said. In and out. I'll call you when I'm there. I'll call you when I'm leaving. I'll lock the doors. I'll be loud. I don't care about the car, I said, the words sounding spoiled in my mouth. Let the city tow it. I don't want you to wake up tomorrow and have that be the new unsafety, he said. He pressed his hand to the back of my neck and found a damp braid of my hair, then left it there, a weight that translated as home. I'll be 10 minutes, he lied for my benefit. I let him. He was 15. He called me from the lot, said my name 3 times to slow my heart down, and then said, in that careful voice people use in hospitals, the window. Passenger side. What about it? I said, though my body already knew. It had been anticipating this exact shape of news and rehearsing its collapse. Smashed. He breathed. I could hear the tiny fall of glass when his coat brushed the seat. Your phone's not here. And he stopped. And what? He didn't answer for 2 counts that I will count with other numbers for the rest of my life. The photo, he said finally. From your visor. The one of he didn't finish my daughter's name because the name itself felt like a room. It's gone. It would have made a better story if the intent had always been the chase, that he had wanted the spectacle of fear, the theater. But the theft leaned the night into a different meaning. He hadn't just wanted to frighten me away from the bench he'd used as a stage. He wanted information. Names. Faces. The rings people make to contain their lives. Maybe the chase had been deserted. The police came and made a shape of professionalism around the parts we could present. A report. A patrol. A suggestion to vary my routes, to run with a buddy. A pamphlet that might as well have read "Be a different person." The officer who spoke to me had a kind face and a practiced sadness. He didn't call me ma'am, I appreciated that. He did not promise anything he could not do. The next week and the next, I waited for a number I didn't know to call my phone, for a voice I would recognize instantly to say my name into my ear the way the dark had said it to the dirt. I changed passwords. I locked down photos. I tried to remember what else the visor had held: gas receipts, a crayon. I ran in the mornings with Hannah when the sun made the trees less interested in complicity. The bench went back to being wood. The man was not there. When I saw someone thin in reflective stripes at the corner of my vision, my stomach rose like a bad elevator. It fell back down when I looked. I slept in jerks. I dreamed I was trying to press a button hard enough to make the light return to a set of rules. Hannah offered to go punch the bench, to kick the trailhead button until it knew her name. I could bring pepper spray, she said. I could bring a flamethrower, I said. We laughed the way you laugh when the word is the only weapon you own. The necklace never turned up. Sometimes I think about the small disc lying by the trail marker in a thin circle of light, the initial winking when the orange comes on, a coin on a table waiting for the hand that put it there to take it back. Sometimes I imagine a stranger picking it up and wearing it on a neck I cannot picture without wanting to harm something. Sometimes I leave it where it is in my mind because that version of the story lets it be a marker, a breadcrumb that would lead someone competent to the idea of me. I still run. Not alone. Not without a battery. Not without telling someone my route and the time I expect to come back. I run the way you walk through a room you used to own after someone else has moved into it. You touch the cabinets out of habit and find them holding different cups. On certain evenings, when the lights click on in their sequential courtesy, I feel the old urge to press the trailhead button, the need to say I am here to a system that answers by giving you orange. I don't press it. I let the timer do what it does. I listen to Hannah talk about the boring mercy of her day. When we crest the hill, I look at the bench and allow myself one thought: he sits there when we are somewhere else. The police never called to say they'd found him. The story did not end with competence. It ended the way nights usually do, by becoming day. But sometimes, very late, I wake because a sound not unlike breathing has threaded itself into whatever I was dreaming, and I lie there and wait for it to identify itself. It always does. Air conditioner. Pipes. The drunk couple downstairs apologizing to each other too loudly. And still my body remembers the feeling of a breath that belonged to someone whose eyes believed they deserved answers. People say you were brave. They say you were lucky. They tell you about pepper spray, whistles preposterously small and bright as candy, an app that will call your husband if you shake your phone like a maraca. I nod and say thank you and put my shoes by the door. When we pass the north bench now, Hannah offers a salute with 2 fingers and a snort. I don't. I keep my head forward and my eyes on the slice of water and my breath inside my body. The lights click their schedule, stepping us toward the parking lot like a parent turning on hallway bulbs for a child who insists they're fine. I am fine. Also, I am not. Both can be true. At home, the visor is empty. Sometimes I put a different photo there and sometimes I leave the space blank on purpose, a small memorial to the night that reshelved the world. My husband replaced the window, he vacuumed enough glass to weigh in his palm and not regret. He bought me a new case with a cover for the camera, as if anonymity could be an accessory, and when he handed it to me he said my name 3 times again, just in case the world had forgotten it in the interim. I still count steps on the switchback that smells like pennies. I still note the thunk of the footbridge like punctuation. I still hear, in the quiet between songs of summer insects, the particular open-mouthed sound of a person trying to learn how to breathe while staring. I turn my face forward and let the sound slide off the present like a hand slipping from a wet railing. The path leads to the lot. The lot leads to the street. The street leads to home. When the lights go out and come back on, I don't look for who pressed the button. I just run.